This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, gaslighting on COVID and the real reason Americans aren't allowed to congregate anymore. With us this evening and backed by popular demand, James Patrick Riley, a farmer, a television producer, and many other things. Jim, what an honor to have you here.
Great to be here, Dr. Glazov.
Fantastic, and I'd love to be called doctor, except maybe not in the context of what's happening today. Jim, you told me recently that you came to understand the meaning of the term gaslighting a few years ago when you were writing a short story. Why don't we begin with that?
Yeah, I was writing a story about a character that was taking advantage of someone, trying to make them doubt themselves, and I was workshopping it with some people, and this woman said, "Oh, you're writing a story about a gaslighter," and I had never heard the term before. I may have heard it vaguely, but I never knew its meaning. And since then, it's kind of like many terms you learn, you start hearing them more and more. But I've heard the term quite a bit in the last year or so, and it seems to be very appropriate for our times because there's a lot of gaslighting going on in 2020.
So thank you, Jim. So look, let's talk about gaslighting a little bit first, then we'll get into what the, I guess we could say the cabal and deep state are doing in terms of gaslighting. Just in general, gaslighting, we see it in a lot of abusive relationships. I've written a book on psychopaths, but overall, in a general sense, it's when an abuser, of course, is emotionally, psychologically abusing his victim. But we can begin with the fact that they're making the victim question their own reality, question what they're seeing, question everything that's happening around them and their own judgment.
Yeah, and when we look at political campaigns, particularly this year, but ABC, Washington Post did a poll on the Wisconsin race for president, and they predicted that President Trump was about 17 points behind, just a disastrous finish in Wisconsin. Now, even if you believe the fraud-tainted results of the Wisconsin race, it was razor thin. There's nowhere near 17 points behind, basically. And what they do with these polls that are meant to discourage voters is make the electorate think that their candidate cannot possibly win. And I think that's been going on for years and years. I'm old enough to remember voting for Ronald Reagan, my first election as an 18-year-old. And I can remember being told there was absolutely no way that Ronald Reagan could ever win the presidency. And that it goes on so many different fronts that I don't think that we're aware of how discouraging that can be to our psyche.
Absolutely. So look, they publish these fake polls. They declare certain questions off limits. They insist that you're crazy if you're not acting a certain way. So we get all this. For instance, so I did a lot of work on psychopaths in terms of jihad and what jihadists do and what Islamic supremacism does. So when there's a jihadist attack, the people who want to talk about what's causing jihad and what jihad is, they're told that they're Islamophobic and all this stuff. So we see a lot of gaslighting in that context where the abuser tries to tell the victim that they're the real abusers, right? So after every jihadist attack, it's the Islamophobes' fault. So we also know in romantic relationships that, let's say, when somebody catches their spouse cheating, that the abuser, the cheater, the narcissist, the psychopath, whoever he or she is, will tell the person that caught them that they're crazy, that they're imagining things, etc., etc. So let's even start with today. The other day, and I'm not kidding, a woman followed me around in a supermarket, ending with shouting, "You effing asshole." because I just refused to wear the mask properly. It began with her telling me to put it up. I told her to mind her own business. It's just very, very typical what's happening today. But she followed me around, was lecturing me about how I'm endangering people, and then, of course, shouting at me and making a scene in the supermarket. I should have videotaped it. But this is happening everywhere, Jim. But it's a form of gaslighting, right? Because we're the crazy ones. See, I don't want to wear a mask, so I'm crazy, right?
Yeah, well, I think that I was looking at the history of ICU shortages in Southern California, actually across the nation. And every 2 or 3 years, ICUs are typically overloaded in the winter and the flu season. And I was in 2009 when the swine flu came along. Southern California doctors were worried about an overload of the ICU bed shortage. But now, back then, if you didn't close your business or you didn't wear a mask, you weren't guilty of trying to kill old people. But now, if Jamie doesn't wear a mask in the store, he's really guilty of trying to kill older people. He hates older people, and they're using this relentlessly against people. If you don't see fit, I was trying to buy something with my son today, and I had these cheaters on to read. And when I had the mask on, my glasses were fogging up. I couldn't read. If I pull the mask down, then suddenly I'm trying to kill older people. So they're trying to impute motives to you that you don't have in order to discourage you.
And even absolutely, and yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Well, I was just thinking. I mean, it came to mind as you were speaking about jihad. In the 18th century, there was a reprint of a letter printed from a Turkish potentate of some sort, and it outlines what would happen to the West if they ever went to war against the Ottomans. And it says, don't even think about it because we will poison your sons. We will castrate your children. The prospect of going to war to defend yourself against the Turks was painted as such an outrageous act that no one would even attempt it because the outcome would be so horrendous. And it goes back to the story of David and Goliath. Basically, it would be ridiculous to try and even oppose the Philistines or Tokyo Rose. You soldiers in the Pacific should all go home while you still can. We're encouraged to lose the battle before we even start it by psychologically dismantling us.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've been thinking through these accusations, you know, and how they don't add up. This whole thing, it looks kind of real in the beginning. There's this virus, and you could have it. And if you're not wearing a mask, you could kill somebody, you know. But then we begin to think this through. First of all, the asymptomatic spread is not a thing. That's already, you know, it's been documented and told, but the media is not covering it. But it gets deeper than that. Jim, I mean, the solution could be we could all just kill ourselves and then nobody would get COVID, right? So there's this implication overall that your freedom and your humanity is a threat to others. You are a murderer if you want to be free. And that very assumption ultimately is what mass murder really is. Give us your thoughts on the speciousness and just the absolute imbecility of this argument that you're a murderer if you don't wear a mask. In the end, in my opinion, they're the real killers.
Yeah, well, I think there's a war on dialogue. I mean, there's a war on actual exchange of opinions. I was kind of gratified my alma mater. A lot of public health officials and hygiene experts and doctors from Stanford, Ioannidis and I can't remember Jay Bhattacharya, was just saying, you know, there are more holistic things to consider than just the disease itself. And we need to understand what we're going to be destroying if we shut down weddings and funerals and graduations and school and work. the economy is a human reality, so we need to consider it. But even actually having that discussion means you are at war with humanity. And I think that people are very afraid to have an open, free-ranging discussion. I think that you would agree, most people agree, that when you actually have a moderated debate, one side gets 2 minutes, the other side gets 2 minutes, you begin to see who's telling the truth. And we're seeing very little of that. We don't see any real dialectic anymore at all. We hear nonstop propaganda. And I was even listening to the LA County health director the other day. They were saying, not only do you need to obey these mandates, you need to make sure you don't question the mandates. That should send shivers down people's spine. We can't have a discussion anymore.
Yeah, and all part of the gaslighting theme. The way I see it, Jim, muzzling people and hiding the image of God in the creation of humans, that's murder. I've been thinking about how there's actually a lot of things that are worse than death. And what I mean by that is, what did our forefathers die for? Why are we alive to begin with? Just to live life in terror of death all the time is not really living. And the Bible tells us that we're not supposed to be afraid. I find something in this fear that they want us to live in the masks that they want us to wear. There's something very anti-Christ in that. Would you agree?
Oh, exactly. I mean, it's a strange passage, of course, but Jesus is on the Sea of Galilee, and and apparently that particular body of water is prone to violent winds, and there's huge storms, and the small boat, and they're about to go down, and the disciples are saying, Master, I can't remember exactly the verse, but he wakes up and he calms the storm, but he says, "Oh, ye of little faith." One of the things that Jesus constantly reminds his disciples is they have little faith, and that they're too fearful. And fear and doubt are sins. It's hard for us to track with that sometimes, because we're sympathetic, well, all of us, for having fear and doubt. But those are sins, and our natural state is cowardice. Our natural state is fearfulness, and we have to work to overcome it. I can just tell you, Jamie, from our experience, I began becoming very vocal in the last 3 or 4 years. I'm engaged in lawsuits against 9 school districts, and I upset a lot of people by speaking my mind. But our business has mushroomed because we're attracting people who really want to live. And some of our Saturdays have been 5 times what the volume of previous Saturdays were. So I can tell you that going to war is a battle, but it has rewards because people are grateful to hear the truth.
That's fantastic, Jim. Just as a last thought on everything that you're saying, just the logic in all of this gaslighting and in what the cabal is trying to get into our heads. I want to live for a long time, but let's just hypothetically say, God forbid, that I'm on my deathbed. The last thing that I would want is, I just can't imagine laying there saying, make sure that Jim Riley's business is closed down and that all other businesses are closed down when I die. The connection of those two things is just mind-boggling.
Well, it's my birthday today, and my family took me to breakfast at a restaurant in Yucaipa that's open, and it was crowded, okay? It was crowded. It was a great breakfast place, great omelets, great pancakes. And I look around, all older people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, people who theoretically are the most vulnerable to COVID. And I don't know an older person. I've known 2 people who died from COVID. I can't imagine either of them asking the rest of the world to stop for for them. I mean, far from it. They would want their grandchildren to go on with the weddings, go on with the bar mitzvahs, go on with living life. And it's demonic. It's absolutely demonic. The opposite of life, God, is death, basically. And what they're worshiping is death before its time.
Absolutely. Happy birthday to you, Jim. You're getting younger and wiser all the time.
I'm looking forward to my 30s. I truly am. And, birthdays are no big deal to me. But the birthday of grandchildren, which a lot of people are actually barred from seeing their grandkids today. Yeah. This is breaking up families. People are afraid. And to me, I'm afraid of climbing El Capitan, but I'm not afraid of a virus.
Absolutely. Jim, happy birthday to you. Thank you for your truth-telling and your battle for freedom, and we wish you the best.
Thank you, Dr. Glazov. Good visiting with you.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you soon on the Glazov Gang.